I arrived at the headquarters hotel on a Tuesday that felt like a poorly finished Monday. Light rain, low clouds, and the kind of traffic that makes you tired before the shift even starts. The building was too large for the street it stood on, like it had been placed there by mistake. Dark glass, a flickering letter on the sign, and a red carpet at the entrance worn thin from years of use. I had been transferred from a smaller hotel in the same chain, one of those places near a highway exit with weak coffee, minimal staff, and a manager who couldn't afford to miss a single shift. I was doing well there. My numbers were clean. Complaints were low. Corporate was happy. And when corporate is happy, they move you. The email framed it as an opportunity. The word transfer was used like a compliment. But the second paragraph told the truth. Immediate coverage required for the night manager position until further notice. No end date, no overlap, just urgency. The official explanation was brief and sterile. The previous night manager was no longer with the company. That was it. No farewell message, no internal memo, no reason given. It was as if he had never existed, and the position had simply been left empty. Like a chair no one wanted to acknowledge. When I walked through the automatic doors for the first time, the air conditioning hit immediately. Too cold. Intentionally so. The kind of cold meant to signal control. The lobby smelled of citrus disinfectant layered over an expensive air freshener that had been applied a little too aggressively. From a distance, everything looked polished. Up close, the wear was obvious. A chipped corner on the front desk, scratches on the elevator frame, a dark stain in the carpet that cleaning never quite erased. The day shift receptionist recognized me before I even clipped on my badge. "You're Paul, right?" I nodded. "I'm Alana. Corporate let us know you'll be covering nights." "Starting tonight," I said. She hesitated for half a second. "Good luck," she said, then corrected herself quickly. "I mean, welcome." She led me behind the front desk to the small administrative office used during overnight hours. 2 desks, a metal filing cabinet, and an old computer that looked like it belonged in a storage room, not the nerve center of a major hotel. A handwritten note was taped to the side of the monitor. "Do not update the system. Do not click pop-ups." I recognized it immediately. Every large operation has something old and fragile buried at its core. "That's the legacy system," Alana said, pointing at the screen. "The chain is migrating, but this property never fully transitioned. Only central IT touches it, when they can." The interface was blue and white, blocky, outdated. It looked like something designed decades ago and never replaced. "Is there a manual?" I asked. She laughed softly without humor. "There's Frank." She nodded toward the security guard sitting near the office door, a heavy-set man with the posture of someone who had worked too many overnight shifts. He raised his hand slightly in greeting. "He's been here 10 years, she said. "He knows how things work." I introduced myself. His handshake was firm. "Frank," he said, "you came from the East Side property." "That's right." "That place is quiet," he said, not as a compliment. Alana handed me a brown envelope. "Keys, radio, temporary login, and this." She placed a single sheet of paper on the desk. No letterhead, no signature, just a list of night procedures. Cash reconciliation, guest requests, parking lot rounds, incident reports. All standard. Halfway down the page, one line stood out. 13th floor must remain inaccessible during the night shift. I looked up. "The 13th floor?" I asked. Alana adjusted a pen on the desk, buying time. "It's a procedure," she said. "For what reason?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Because that's how it's done." Frank cleared his throat quietly. "You don't want to dig into that," he said. "Not as a warning, as advice. You do your job. You file your report. You go home in the morning. No 13th floor." "But it's a hotel," I said. "If there's a floor, there are rooms, guests. Is it maintenance?" Frank shrugged. "Call it whatever you want." Alana returned to the front desk, leaving the paper between us. I've never liked rules without explanations, not because I enjoy pushing boundaries, but because unexplained rules create problems, audits, gaps, liability. But I also knew corporate culture well enough to understand something else. Corporate doesn't like questions. Corporate likes results. My shift officially began at 11. The day staff left. The night settled in. The lobby didn't go silent, just quieter. Hotels have their own background noise, elevators, ice machines, distant conversations, rolling luggage. Just after midnight, the phone rang. A man asked about a late checkout. Calm voice, confident. I explained policy, made a small exception, logged it into the system. Normal. The strange part came in pieces too small to name. The system showed a blocked reservation with an internal code I didn't recognize. No guest name. The room marked occupied. No check-in record. When I tried to open the details, the system froze. Not crashed. Just stopped. I called Frank over. "You seen this before?" He looked at the screen and didn't step closer. "Don't touch it." "But I need to know what it is." "I know, and you won't tonight." "Is it a glitch?" He glanced down the hallway, then back at me. "It's 13. "No one's gone up," I said. "I've been here all night." Frank pointed at the small black camera dome in the corner. "You think everything that happens goes through you?" That was the first moment I realized the hotel had layers. At 2:17 a.m., the service elevator activated on its own. I saw the panel light up, numbers rising. "You call that?" I asked. "No one does," Frank said. The elevator came down empty. Doors opened. No one inside. Just a smell that escaped with the air. Old fabric. Something sweet, too sweet, like perfume trapped in a closed space. The doors shut. The panel went dark. I checked the cameras. Everything looked normal, except for a brief delay on the service elevator feed, like recorded footage pretending to be live. "Is that normal?" I asked. Frank didn't answer right away. Normal means something different here. At 2:30, a woman called to confirm her reservation. I asked for her name. I searched. Nothing came up. "It's there," she said calmly. "I'm looking at the system." "Check the night block," she said. "What block?" "The one you keep." She hung up. I looked at Frank. He opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet and pulled out a thick black notebook. No label, no markings. He placed it on the desk carefully. Inside were names, dates, room numbers, written in different handwriting. One column was labeled floor. Many entries read 13. That's when I understood something far more unsettling than any ghost story. That rule wasn't meant to keep people out. It was meant to keep people from asking questions. I closed the notebook slowly. "So what's the procedure?" I asked. Frank leaned against the desk. "You log what they tell you to log. You don't force it into the system. You don't talk about it with day staff, and you don't go up." I thought about the previous manager, the empty position, the urgency. Then I heard it. A soft metallic sound in the hallway. Once. Then again. Between the sounds, something like a hand calmly testing a locked door. Frank stood up slowly. Before opening the office door, he looked at me. "If you keep asking questions," he said, "eventually someone answers." He turned the handle, and the hallway light spilled inside. The door closed quietly behind Frank, and for a moment the office felt too still. Not silent, just paused like the building was holding its breath. He came back less than a minute later. "Nothing you need to worry about," he said, already sitting back down. His tone wasn't reassuring. It was procedural. "What was it?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. "There's a notebook," he said instead. "You only use it when the system doesn't apply." I looked at the black notebook again. It hadn't moved, but it felt more present now, like an object you become aware of only after someone tells you it matters. "How often does the system not apply?" I asked. Frank considered the question. "More often than you'd think," he said. The rest of the night passed without incident. No more elevator movement, no more phone calls. By morning, the lobby filled with daylight and voices, and the hotel slipped back into its daytime version of itself. The notebook went back into the drawer. The 13th floor went back to being an unspoken line on a piece of paper. When I handed off to the morning supervisor, she asked the same question Alana had. "Anything unusual?" I thought about the blocked reservation, the elevator, the smell. "Nothing outside the norm," I said. She nodded and signed the report without reading it. That should have been my warning. Over the next few nights, patterns began to form. Subtle ones. The kind you don't notice until you stop looking for problems and start looking for consistency. Tuesdays and Thursdays were always heavier, not in visible foot traffic, but in back-end activity. The energy usage reports spiked slightly between 2 and 3 in the morning. Not enough to trigger alerts, but enough to be measurable. Those spikes always traced back to the same vertical zone. The 13th floor. The cameras covering that floor never failed during the day. Only at night. Always with the same generic maintenance message. Automatically approved. No ticket number I could trace. I searched through archived emails and found requests for camera maintenance going back years. Approved within minutes. No signatures. No discussion. It was like the system had learned to accept it on its own. One night, while reorganizing the office drawers, I found a key I didn't recognize. No label, no tag, just a worn metal key with smooth edges from long use. I was sure it hadn't been in the envelope Alana gave me. Frank noticed it in my hand. "That's been waiting for you," he said. "For how long?" "For when you stopped asking why." That answer sat wrong in my chest. "What's it for?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. 13. I didn't use it that night, but I didn't put it back either. The following week, a system error forced my hand. 2 reservations assigned to the same room, same time, same name spelled slightly differently. The room number belonged to the 13th floor. It was just after 2:20 a.m. Frank was outside dealing with an issue in the parking garage. The radio crackled. "You know where it is," he said. "You know what time it is." The service elevator accepted the call immediately. The doors closed with a soft, final sound I hadn't noticed before. The ride up felt longer than it should have. The numbers on the panel moved normally, but the sound of the motor deepened, like the elevator was carrying more weight than it showed. When the doors opened, the 13th floor didn't feel abandoned. The lights were on. Not all of them, but enough. The carpet was cleaner than the floors below. The walls looked newer. There were no room numbers, just doors, closed, unmarked. There were people there. They weren't walking around. They weren't speaking loudly. They stood in small groups, talking quietly, like they were waiting for something that didn't have a scheduled start time. No one looked at me when I stepped out of the elevator. That was worse than if they had. The air was warmer, heavier. It carried the same scent I'd noticed before. Fabric, storage, something sweet underneath. I walked further down the corridor, my footsteps louder than they should have been. That's when I saw him. He was seated near the far end of the hallway, facing an open room. No uniform, no badge, just a suit without a tie. The previous night manager. He looked healthy, calm, comfortable, like he belonged there. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. "You took longer than I expected," he said. "I was told you disappeared," I said. He shook his head slightly. "I didn't disappear," he replied. "I stayed." I looked past him into the room. There was no altar, no symbols, just tables, chairs, paperwork, people seated, speaking quietly, like a late-night meeting that had gone on too long. "What is this?" I asked. "Operations," he said. "Continuity." "Continuity of what?" He stood and straightened his jacket. "The hotel," he said. "Someone has to keep it balanced." My stomach tightened. "Is this a cult?" I asked. He frowned just slightly. "Don't use that word," he said. "It simplifies things too much." "Then explain it." He stepped aside so I could see more of the room. "Explanations don't help," he said. "Understanding comes later." "And you understood," I said. He nodded. "It was easier than leaving." "Are you trapped here?" He looked genuinely surprised. "No," he said. "I chose to stay." He stepped closer. "You don't have to decide tonight," he said. "No one ever does." The elevator doors opened behind me without being called. When I reached the lobby again, everything looked normal. Clean, bright, detached. Frank was back at the desk. "You went up," he said. "Yes." He didn't ask anything else. The next morning, the system error was gone. No duplicate reservations, no complaints, no record that anything had happened at all. But when I reviewed the printed procedures for the night shift, there was an additional line that hadn't been there before. Night management, presence required after 2 a.m. I didn't ask where it came from. After that night, the hotel began to run better than it ever had. That wasn't a feeling. It was measurable. Fewer guest complaints, fewer internal incidents, fewer calls after midnight that required actual intervention. The numbers smoothed out in a way that would have made corporate very happy. It should have been reassuring. It wasn't. There was something unsettling about how easily everything fell into place, like the building had stopped resisting, like it had accepted something it had been holding back for a long time. Frank was still there every night, but quieter, not withdrawn, just done talking. When I tried to bring up the 13th floor, his answers were short and consistent. Follow the procedure. Log what you're told. After 2, you stay. And I did. Staying didn't mean performing any new task. There were no additional checklists, no new responsibilities listed anywhere. It just meant being present, like being on call for a system that never triggered an alarm, but still required someone to be watching. At exactly 2 a.m., the temperature in the hotel shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. The air felt heavier, more stagnant. Sounds didn't disappear. They reorganized. Elevators became softer. Footsteps dulled. Even the hum of the lighting changed pitch slightly. The service elevator began moving on its own more often. Sometimes it stopped at the 12th floor, sometimes the 14th, never long enough to log, only long enough to register internally. The black notebook gained new names. Some were familiar. Guests I'd seen earlier that evening. Others weren't. A few names appeared again and again, always on the same days, always marked with the same floor. I started noticing what happened after people left that floor. They didn't look shaken. They didn't look excited. They looked relieved, like something had been set down, like pressure had been redistributed. That bothered me more than fear would have. One night, while running reports, I noticed a new field in the system, one I was certain hadn't been there before. Continuity status active. I clicked it. The screen didn't load. It just flickered once, acknowledging the command without granting access. Frank was standing behind me again, silent until I spoke. Has that always been there? I asked. Yes, he said. Then why am I only seeing it now? He pulled a chair over and sat down slowly. Because now it applies to you. The previous manager didn't appear every night after that, but I felt his presence in the same way you feel an outdated policy still influencing decisions, not visible, just embedded. I noticed changes in myself. After 2, I stopped checking the time. The hours mattered less. Sometimes I wouldn't realize it was close to morning until the light in the lobby began to shift. I also stopped questioning minor inconsistencies. When guests complained about muted sounds coming from above, I blamed plumbing. When an elevator was unavailable at night, I explained maintenance without hesitation. The explanations came easily, too easily. One night I found a badge on the admin desk. Not mine, not Frank's. The plastic was yellowed with age. The photo was familiar. The previous manager. Title, Night Manager. Status, active. On the back, written in faded ink, were 3 words. After 2 a.m. I didn't sleep that day. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about how that time had stopped being a number and become a condition. The next night, the phone rang at exactly 2 a.m. Not 2:01, not 1:59. I answered. Good evening, a calm male voice said. Is night management available? Yes, I replied automatically. There's been an absence, the voice continued. We need to make an adjustment. An adjustment to what? Balance. Who is this? I asked. That doesn't matter, the voice said. What matters is that someone needs to assume responsibility. The line went dead. Frank watched me from the other side of the desk. For the first time since I arrived, something like concern crossed his face. You're going up again tonight, he said. And if I don't? I asked. He exhaled slowly. Then the hotel will find someone else. I thought about the empty position, the urgency, the way the previous manager hadn't been fired or removed. He'd been absorbed. I stepped into the service elevator without arguing. This time, the 13th floor was quieter, almost empty. The doors were closed. The lights were dimmer. At the far end, the same room was open. The previous manager stood waiting. It's time, he said. Time for what? To formalize. He gestured toward a table inside the room. Papers were neatly arranged. not contracts, reports, internal procedures, updates written in corporate language. Nothing ceremonial, nothing symbolic, just administration. You don't need to understand it, he said. You just need to continue it. And if I leave? I asked. He looked at me with something close to exhaustion. Everyone leaves eventually, he said, but someone always stays. The air felt thicker. My watch read 2:17 a.m. The same minute everything had started. I understood then that this wasn't a belief system, it wasn't worship, it wasn't even secrecy in the traditional sense. It was a function, one that had to be filled. When I returned to the lobby, Frank was gone. In his place was a handwritten note on the desk. Thanks for covering the shift. The next morning, the day staff greeted me by name, complimented the numbers, mentioned how pleased corporate was. In the system, my title had been updated. Night manager, permanent. And the procedure sheet had changed again. Night management, continuous presence required after 2 a.m., non-transferable. I still go home every morning. But after 2, I always stay. After Frank stopped showing up, no one mentioned it. Not directly. No one asked where he'd gone. His name simply vanished from the printed schedules in the back office. The locker he used for his jacket sat empty for a few days, then someone else started using it like it had always been shared. I checked the system. His user profile still existed, but the status read, inactive, role concluded. No date, no note. That was how the hotel handled absences. Not with questions or explanations, with redistribution. After that, I became the only fixed point overnight. The radio stayed silent after 2 a.m. Not broken. Disabled by procedure. Housekeeping finished early. Maintenance stopped responding once the clock passed that line. After 2, the building was mine in a way that wasn't written anywhere. And the 13th floor stopped feeling like a place. It became an interval. Sometimes I went up because a back-end indicator told me to. Sometimes because the phone rang and no one was on the line. Sometimes because I could feel the pull, subtle but persistent, like gravity changing direction. Each visit was different in detail but identical in structure. People arrived knowing exactly where to go. They spoke quietly. They avoided eye contact, not out of fear but out of functional respect. Like I wasn't an intruder, just another component in the process. The former manager was almost always there, not supervising, not leading, just present, like a reference point the system still needed. You get used to it, he told me one night as we stood in the unmarked hallway. Not because it gets easier, because it becomes necessary. Necessary for who? I asked. For the building, he said, and for everyone who still needs it to work. That was when I noticed something that disturbed me deeply. The 13th floor didn't create problems. It solved them. Guests who arrived agitated left calmer. Staff conflicts dropped. Turnover slowed to an impossible degree. The hotel wasn't feeding on anything. It was redistributing something, and that made it acceptable. One night, a call came in from corporate. An internal number I'd never seen active at that hour. Good evening, a woman said, professional, detached. We're just confirming you're maintaining night procedure. Yes, I replied. Excellent. The metrics look strong. There's been a proposal to extend the window. The window for what? Access, she said. We're evaluating keeping operations active past 4 on select nights. That wasn't part of anything I'd agreed to. I wasn't informed of that, I said. There was a short pause. None of this was agreed to, she replied. But it works, doesn't it? The call ended. That night, for the first time, someone left the 13th floor and didn't exit the building. I recognized him. A guest I'd seen multiple times over the past week. Always alone. Always well-dressed. He stepped into the service elevator with me and stood silently beside me during the descent. When the doors opened in the lobby, he didn't move. The doors closed again. The elevator went back up. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at the dark panel. When I returned upstairs later, the man was gone. In his place, there was a folder on the main table. Inside were internal documents, corporate memos, expansion plans, property assessments, all stamped approved. The implication settled slowly. The floor wasn't just maintaining the hotel. It was being used to grow it. The next morning, the printed procedures included a new line. Gradual expansion as demand requires. I started thinking about leaving. Really leaving. I updated my resume, took interviews during the day, exhausted and unfocused. Nothing progressed. Recruiters stopped responding. One called to apologize and said the role had been frozen due to upper-level guidance. I didn't tell anyone. That night, the former manager met me before I reached the room. "You've been thinking about leaving," he said. "That's none of your business." He smiled faintly. "Once you're inside," he said, "a lot of things become shared." "This never ends, does it?" I asked. "It does," he said, "when there's no one left to support it." I realized then that this wasn't something designed for me. It was a cycle, and it only needed someone competent enough not to break it. At 2 a.m. that night, I didn't wait for the call. I went up on my own. The 13th floor was ready. The last night before everything fully settled, the hotel was busy. Not loud, not chaotic. Busy in a controlled way, like every person inside the building had been placed deliberately. The lobby had steady movement, but no urgency. Conversations stayed low. Even the sound of rolling suitcases felt muted, regulated. At 1:55 a.m., I was already standing. Not from nerves, from routine. At exactly 2 cows, the legacy system emitted a sound I'd never heard before. Not an alarm, not an error. A brief notification tone, almost polite. A message appeared on the screen. Continuity required. I didn't call the elevator. The service doors opened on their own. During the ascent, I realized I wasn't counting floors anymore. The numbers moved upward, but the sense of height had disappeared. The building felt deeper than it was tall, like the hotel extended downward into something unseen. The 13th floor was different that night. The corridor lights were all on. Every door stood open. Inside each room were tables, chairs, neatly stacked documents, as if people had stepped out temporarily and would return at any moment. At the end of the hallway, the former night manager was waiting. But he wasn't alone. Others stood with him. Not identical, not uniform, but similar in posture. People who looked like they'd once held responsibility somewhere. Some faces felt vaguely familiar, like old corporate photos I couldn't place. They weren't arranged in a circle. There was no focal point. It wasn't a meeting. It was a roster. "The hotel has expanded," the former manager said, "and you handled it well." "This wasn't part of the deal," I said, though the words felt hollow as I spoke them. "It never is," he replied, "but it's always necessary." He handed me a document, not a contract, no signatures, just an updated procedure. Night management, headquarters level. I scanned it quickly. Neutral language, short lines, no promises, no threats, just responsibilities redistributed across properties. "This doesn't end," I said. "It does," he replied, "when you're no longer needed." "And when is that?" He paused. "When the hotel no longer needs to function." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was efficient, like a server room running at optimal capacity. I confirmed the update in the system. One click. The building responded in small ways. A shift in air pressure, a subtle vibration through the floor, more like settling than movement. When I returned to the lobby, it was empty. The clock read 2:43 a.m. Frank was gone, permanently. In his place stood a new security guard. Younger, uniform stiff with newness, too alert for that hour. "Evening, sir," he said. "Radio's on if you need anything." I nodded. "You won't," I said, "not after 2. He smiled, relieved. Days passed, then weeks, then months. I still leave every morning. I still have an apartment. I still sleep. I still talk to people who don't know anything about the 13th floor. But whenever the clock approaches 2 a.m., I feel the building pull at me, even if I'm not there yet. Sometimes, when I arrive for my shift, there are new names in the system. New properties flagged, new procedures marked pending activation. The chain is growing, and in every hotel large enough to support it, there's a floor that doesn't appear on guest maps. A floor that only operates at night. A floor that requires someone willing to stay. This story is based on accounts shared online by night shift workers in anonymous forums and communities. While the details cannot be independently verified, the events reflect real experiences described by people who have worked overnight in similar environments. Have you ever worked somewhere with rules that were never meant to be explained? Have you noticed strange patterns that only appear during night shifts? If this story stayed with you, consider liking the video and subscribing for more night shift horror stories. And feel free to comment with a profession or workplace you think should be explored next. The night always needs someone on duty.